guys, welcome back to another video. Welcome back to ASMR Money Mentor. Welcome back to another week of videos. We'll be getting started here in just a moment. I think I need to create a real quick thumbnail. Do you mind? Okay. Something like this, maybe. I don't know. Okay. I don't know. I might use that. Oh, wow. Can you guys believe we are almost in October, I think, when I drop this video. We will be in the month of October. Halloween is right around the corner. Then we'll have other holidays, of course, coming up in November and December. And the year will be complete. So this week I want to dedicate the entire week to talking through budgets. I know, it's a bad word, right, for so many people. It's almost as if we don't like budgets. I actually love budgets. In fact, I created back in 2005 my very own Build a Budget, which I will be sharing with you this week. I know we've talked about this before, but I've got lots of new people. And so I think by reinforcing your commitment to doing better with money, we need to talk about it. And I think that we all need to set aside time in our daily lives to think about our budget, because the most successful budgets take thought, and then you turn that thought into action, and then you practice the budget all year long. And today we'll be talking about why a lot of people fail with budgets. But first, the trigger of the week. This trigger I've used before, and I love it. This is Shea Sugar Scrub. Of course, I may have said it wrong. Coconut lime. again, today, episode number 102, we were going to be talking about why budgets fail. When we come back in a couple of days for episode 103, I'm going to be talking about how I became wealthy because I defined it myself through the budgets. And I'm going to share with you my typical budget that I've used over many years. And I want you guys to be thinking about your own budgets as well. This is a practice that I've put into place since 2005, and it has to be at least way up there on one of the top reasons why I've done well with money over time. And I think that you guys can do the same. And when we come back on Friday for episode 104, I want to revisit my 2025 budget because, believe it or not, I am still working on my 2025 budget. Do you remember I mentioned that as the year goes on, especially when we get to August, September, you should really be thinking about the following year. Once you complete your budget, as you did hopefully for 2024, your job then was to maintain the budget and to work the budget. And I will explain how that works in the next episode. But right now, I want you to take time during the week to think about 2025. So many people just don't really think this way, and I want you guys to think this way. I want you to visualize the entire year, next year of 12 months, as it relates to money, like what's on your radar, what's going to be coming up, what do you need to pay for, how much money do you have coming in, and maybe don't create your budget quite yet, but begin thinking about it. And in fact, you can create the budget on your Excel spreadsheet and save it, but then every week you go back to it. And what I like to do is I like to put down a percentage of completion. Like right now, with my 2025 budget that I'm looking at on my computer, it is approximately 80% complete at this point. So in the next 2 to 3 months, I'm going to bump that up to 85, to 90, to 95, and then 100% of completion. And then you release the budget in January and you start working your budget. So more on that in a couple of days. But back to the content of today's episode. I wanted to talk through 3 reasons why budgets tend to fail for most people. Now remember, as I always say, you guys are not most people. If you're taking the time to watch my channel, you are the elite when it comes to money management. You have that awareness already. You want to do better with money, which is why you're here. You also might be here because you just like to hear whispers, and that's okay too. But regardless of why you're here, I want all of you to do better with your budgets in 2025. And, of course I'm doing this week because I recall that last week in a couple of my episodes I said, hey, I'm going to be talking about my budget, right? Well, I never did that. I got so excited about whatever I was talking about, I forgot to circle back to reasons why budgets fail. I mean, if I were to ask you this question, why do you think that your budgets have failed in the past? It's almost like working out. I remember back in college, I was on this big kick of wanting to work out, I don't know, I didn't really have time because I was in classes all day long and then I had to study at night and everything was new. Being at the campus for the very first time, it was really exciting. But I started, working out and I overdid it. I lifted way too much weight. I was bench pressing and the next day I was so sore, I hurt myself and I quit. Which is one reason why I think people also, when they're flexing their monetary budgets, or muscles I should say, people tend to quit because they hurt themselves, right? They make mistakes. So I don't want that to happen. I want you, if you are the type of person right now watching this that you've never created a budget, then I want you to succeed with it. And the way in which you can succeed is to not do what I'm going to share with you in this episode. So number one is we have to have a good handle on the vision, and it cannot be unrealistic. So when you're creating a budget, in a couple of days when you come back, you'll see that an operating budget, I like to call it, includes savings. Do you see how significant that is? Most people don't think that way. You have to see savings as an expense in your budget. And isn't it wonderful that that expense does not go to somebody else? It goes to you. You have to think that way. And also, you have to have not only a realistic vision, but you need to have an emergency fund on the side. So perhaps for those of you that do not have an emergency fund right now, is it possible in the next 3 months, October, November, December, leading up into 2025, could you find money in your paychecks that you're getting, even if you don't have a budget right now? Is there any way you can find money to put into your emergency fund? So again, for those of you right now that have a zero for an emergency fund, make that your goal right now. Maybe it's only going to be $500. Maybe it's only going to be $200. But you have to have something in an emergency fund. By the time you get to January, maybe that emergency fund will be complete. Some people say you should have maybe 3 to 4 to 5 months of your true expenses in an emergency fund. But you get to determine that. Personal finance is personal. So be realistic in terms of what you feel as though you can do. If we get to January and you don't have an emergency fund, then you have to earmark money to build the emergency fund. In a perfect world, we would start the year with an emergency fund. But for those of you watching, again, that don't have one, you have to build that into your budget for next year, especially if you don't have the capacity to build it before we get to January. If that makes sense. Okay. But back to number one is that people don't have a good handle on the vision, and that's what I'm trying to share with you and teach you in this episode, is that a very large part of success with money is having a vision. Many of you have really good jobs. You're probably making good money. If you're not, then you have to find a job that can give you good money. You have to keep your expenses down, right? But most people use the economy, inflation as an excuse to not do really well. saying that's you. I'm just saying most people use excuses. They use a scapegoat to compensate for their lack of ability to create their own vision for their future. And so, if, for example, you promise in your budget that you're only going to spend like $50 eating out, well, that might not be realistic. Maybe you say, I'm only going to spend $400 at the grocery store. That may not be realistic. So you have to make sure that you build the plan as realistic as possible. So go back over 2024 right now and look at all the money you spent. One thing you can do, which I like to do, is I go into my credit union's checking account, my checking account with my credit union, I should say, and you can run an Excel document to show you all of the transactions for 2024. So this might be something you'll want to do if you're using your debit card or whatever it is you're using. If it's all going to a credit card, hopefully you're paying the balance off in full every month, right? Wherever you have that money coming out of, go back and do an analysis of 10 months. January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. Well, maybe 9 months, right? Do a 9-month analysis now that we're coming up on October. And download those transactions into an Excel document. Then you can filter them. You just go to the top and you filter. So if you go to the grocery store once a week or whatever it is, you can analyze your grocery store spending and build a macro, or actually just filter it, and then you can add up all the money you spent. Then figure out for those months how many weeks there were to get a weekly amount that you're spending at the grocery store, right? Because that's what you want to know. But we're also building a budget for 12 months, as I'll talk about in the next episode. But you need to have an analysis of your spending before you can build your budget. Otherwise, it's going to be unrealistic. So, number one, you have to have a handle and make it as realistic as possible. Number two, for reasons why budgets tend to fail, is they are too restrictive. They are too restrictive. They are too restrictive. There may not be any wiggle room in your budget, right? And as you'll see in a couple days, you have to build buffers and wiggle room in your budget. And you have to look at those 12 months. And you can make adjustments. So don't restrict yourself too much when you're creating the vision of your budget. And number three, which kind of ties together with number two, but you have to be flexible in your budget. So while you're building it, again, as I mentioned, you're building in the flexibility to give you the opportunity to make adjustments. I make adjustments to my budget all year long. Believe it or not, that is the fun part of managing your budget. I actually like all phases of budgets. I like building them. In fact, that's probably my favorite because that's the forecasting aspect of it. And one thing I learned about myself early on is that I'm a futuristic person, which I think is how I became so good at forecasting, at least from a monetary perspective, what was going to happen. So I would encourage all of you to try to be as futuristic as you can. Again, to see that vision in advance. And as you build your budget then, in that forecasting phase, you're building in flexibility. Number three, you are looking again at the final 12 months. And as as the months go on, for example, if you gave yourself so much money a week for food at the grocery store, and 1 week you spent too much, you're still deducting it from the cells on the budget that you'll see in a couple days, and that's okay. We can't all possibly, get our budgets exactly right, but they will be exactly right at the end of the year. If you have this amount coming in and this amount going out, you cannot make a mistake. If you continue to work the budget and you save it to your computer, and you know exactly where you overspent and where you compensated to make up for that differential. So I'm going to think about wrapping up this episode again today, episode number 102, talking through, setting the stage, if you will, on making your budgets as realistic as possible. Do not make them too restrictive, and also make sure that they are flexible as well, so that you can make adjustments and never go wrong with your budget. So with that, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and close out this episode. If you like content like this, please give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it. Consider subscribing